Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dissenter Weekly update for December 3rd, 2020. I'm Kevin Gosztola, managing editor for Shadowproof.com. Before we get rolling on our whistleblower stories for this week, Brian has a few things for you.
Hi, Kevin. Good to be with you again. Just your regular reminder to make sure that you're following us wherever you're watching. Just want to make sure that you catch Kevin's live streams, the reporting we're publishing from Kevin and from a wide variety of other freelance journalists. So make sure on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, wherever that you're following us. And if you want to support the work that we're doing, we are 100% reader supported, reader funded. All of our funding comes from $5, $10, $15, $20 donations from people like you. So you can, we have a lot of options. You can go to shadowproof.com/donate, or you can sign up directly for Kevin's newsletter, The Dissenter, at dissenter.substack.com. We'll have links to all of this coming up soon. But why don't we head right on into our first story for this week? We have elite FDA inspector blows the whistle on biohazard nightmare at Merck vaccine plant. What's the first story here, Kev?
All right, so first, just to make clear, this is from a couple years ago, and this is a story that was just published by Vanity Fair under the headline, "The COVID vaccines are approaching. Is the FDA ready to inspect the plants where they're made?" And again, I'll just continue just for the purposes of citing this and giving credit where it's due. The subtitle is "The agency's Team Biologics inspects the facilities that make vaccines and blood products for U.S. patients. One whistleblower and other insiders paint a troubling picture of the daunting challenges the elite unit, made up of just 14 investigators, has faced in recent years." And this was done by a journalist named Catherine Eban. It came out on December 2nd. So the reason why I wanted to make sure this was part of this broadcast is because I think this is a universal concern. We're all watching how the FDA is accelerating the production of this vaccine for an understandable reason. And some of it is going to be for profit. Some of it also is because we're having record deaths on every single day. At least right now, we're setting records in terms of death, and there's enormous pressure to deliver a vaccine that can do something to bring this under control, especially when you just have a society and a culture that isn't willing to shut down and pause so that it can stem the tide of this pandemic. And so you have this story that gives us an important detailed look at how a manufacturing plant that works on these vaccines, how they produce these vaccines. So this comes from Durham, North Carolina, and it covers a FDA inspector whose name is Ari Menakem, and he was working in October of 2018. He went to a vaccine plant that's operated by a subsidiary of the pharmaceutical company known as Merck, and he was part of this Team Biologics FDA division that was inspecting 280 manufacturing plants that make vaccines and blood products for U.S. patients. And his job was to make sure that rules and regulations are being followed by these factories. So as I'm just going to read from the story, as it says in the Vanity Fair report here, on his first afternoon at Merck's Durham plant, Menakem's concern deepened when his FDA supervisor belatedly emailed him a 19-page document sent to the agency from a confidential informant at the facility. So we have a whistleblower. It says confidential informant, but effectively that person's a whistleblower. The allegations described a biohazard nightmare. Workers appeared to be defecating and urinating in their uniforms, and feces had been found smeared on the floor of the plant's production area, the letter alleged. In a sterile manufacturing plant, bathroom breaks can be difficult to take because they require additional time, which could serve as one possible explanation for the events inside the Merck plant. Ungowning can take 15 minutes, regowning can take 15 minutes, and on a night shift, there may be no one else to cover an essential worker during that time, Medicam said. The problem was so serious that Syntaz supplies and launders uniforms for the plant's technicians. That Syntaz complained to Merck about the unsanitary condition of the gowning. And the letter states, according to Medicam, he recalls, "I was shocked and incredibly scared. I felt such a heavy burden of responsibility." And it goes on as it continues to flesh out these details, that even more troubling was the fact that the informant first sent this information to the FDA in January 2016, but it was not forwarded to investigators. And that letter had these allegations that, quote, "fecal matter had been found on sterile garments and on the floor of controlled areas. A urine-filled glove had been tied up and placed in a trash container in a critical production area. Technicians had been caught on video dancing in clean room suites, thus sending potentially dangerous particulates into the air." Poop. And the allegations suggested a manufacturing plant that was out of control and that prioritized production at the expense of patient safety. So this biohazard nightmare, which I would agree with those terms, how do we think this all worked out? Medicam asked for help from the FDA. He blew the whistle. He was telling the agency that more had to be done, and they listened to him. In fact, actually, the opposite happened. In November 2018, a month after he did this inspection, he had to file a complaint with the Office of Special Counsel, and he claimed that the FDA had failed to properly regulate vaccine and biologics manufacturing plants. He included allegations related to the inspections at Merck and other manufacturing plants that he had visited. And he laid out all his findings and said that the regulatory enforcement was not good. And then, according to Vanity Fair in May 2019, Medicam resigned from the FDA and he left. So there's a terrifying story, I think, for people who want to believe that the vaccine is somehow going to be sanitary in order to use. I mean, we want to have faith that this is going to be a drug that we can take that isn't going to be something that is harmful to us because it was not produced appropriately and that precautions weren't taken in the manufacturing plants. And so I'm just going to give credit to whoever wrote this. Kate has this paragraph in her report that lays out why this is such a problem. I can't state it better, so I'm just going to use her words. It says, Medicam's experience inside Team Biologics is critical now because it raises questions about the FDA's oversight of the manufacturing plants that will be producing COVID-19 vaccines, because such facilities face financial and production pressures that are often at odds with safety. Regulatory oversight is essential. As well, shifting any drug in development from a controlled laboratory setting to the manufacturing floor and scaling up production from thousands to millions of doses can present a minefield of hazards, leading drugs to become unstable or impure. I mean, what she's referring to there, I think you and I would both understand, are issues of capitalism, because they have to make so much of this drug, or they're going to be it's one corporation that is in charge of taking on the costs of producing this drug. I think this is what's lost in an economy and a country that won't just have the government be the one that pumps out or churns out this vaccine at a quantity that we could all benefit from having in our in our communities. We're relying on these for-profit multinational corporations to do this, and at the same time do it in a way that's going to be sanitary for us all. And we know they're going to cut corners, and we know they're not going to take care of their workers, and we know that in the end, whatever we get, even if it's effective in fighting the virus, it could still have its own side effects and issues as a result of things that are not done properly. And that's what this whistleblower is pointing to. So I think that's why it's important to have that as part of our show.
Yeah, very important story. Thank you for bringing that to us today. I want to move along to our next story here. We have a whistleblower lawsuit that alleges Denver Health cracked down on employees outspoken against systemic racism. What is this story?
So this is another one that ties into the global pandemic. This lawsuit was filed on behalf of Denver Health Workers United by the nonprofit law firm Towards Justice in mid-November, toward the end of November. The complaint was filed under the Colorado Public Health Emergency Whistleblower Act. It's actually a newer law that gave workers some modest protection or something that they could use to defend themselves if they faced retaliation for exposing what was going on during the pandemic. So it lays out in this complaint, I'll just go into it, that on October 14th, 2020, there were 8 Denver health workers, 2 of them named Paul Parator and Christine Russell, who wrote an open letter to their coworkers that addressed the intersecting public health emergencies of COVID-19 and systemic racism and the impact of these emergencies on Denver health workers. For example, this letter noted that during the pandemic, Denver health workers have confronted, quote, the constant fear that we might contaminate or fail to adequately protect ourselves, our family, or our patients, end quote. It went on to speak to the role that Denver Health could play in calling for more action to address deep racial and class inequities of public health in the U.S. And although the letter recounted how Denver Health had actively discouraged workers from organizing or speaking out about issues related to workplace treatment and safety, it also observed that, quote, society has been awakened to the health disparities caused by systemic racism and classism, as well as the negligent and unfair treatment of frontline workers, end quote. And then it went on to say that it also recognized that, quote, we are tired and our commitment to patient care often leaves us vulnerable to neglecting our own health and workplace protections. So Denver Health responded to this letter and basically threatened workers who had signed it. And there was an email that went around to all Denver Health employees admonishing the signatories for obtaining email addresses of people at this company and for accessing the system through by accessing our system through their normal means, and telling all workers that dissemination of the letter violated policies at Denver Health. But as it lays out in the complaint, the signatories didn't obtain any email address through improper means. And while Denver Health would claim to have a rule against the use of work email for non-work purposes, work email addresses at Denver Health are frequently used for non-work purposes. So the stated reasons for Denver Health's admonition were pretextual, and they wrote this email with the intention of threatening workers. And that's how workers felt about the email, that they were in fact being threatened by management of this company. It goes on to cite a specific example in October of this year where there was an emergency medical services professional named Peter Della Vecchia who was interviewed by Colorado Public Radio. He was quoted from that interview in an article that was published under the headline, "Coronavirus has accelerated healthcare worker burnout, and it's a reckoning we all have to face." And in that article, he describes what it had been like to be working through this intense pandemic. And then Denver Health reprimanded Della Vecchia following this article, claiming his interview was on behalf of Denver Health and violated the press policy for the company. At no point, however, did Della Vecchia represent that he was speaking on behalf of Denver Health. He spoke out publicly about the stresses and workplace health and safety dangers that he faced every day on this job. But he was admonished basically in contrast to other times that workers have been praised when they spoke to the press, especially when Denver Health arranged those interviews. So it's not like all the workers weren't speaking to media. Della Vecchia was passed over for a special assignment opportunity. So you have, this thing that normally surfaces in a lot of these whistleblower retaliation stories where you are passed over for a promotion. Together, the facts suggest that Denver Health retaliated against Della Vecchia because the fact that he was speaking out publicly about the health of workers during COVID-19. And I mean, it makes sense. They are concerned that they are going to look like they're treating their workers poorly, and they don't want Della Vecchia to represent that they're not doing all they can to take care of their staff. But obviously, this is not the way to handle that. You should, you should defend your company and speak out and rebut the claims that are being made by staff. But all too often, this is what we see, especially in private companies. And one of the things that we've seen states struggling with is how regulations could be improved in order to rein in businesses and private organizations and these corporations, so that there's something that can be done to protect workers, not even just essential workers, but all kinds of workers who are being put under stress, especially by this pandemic. So that comes from the complaint that was filed with the Colorado Labor Department. We'll follow and see if there's any kind of result that is favorable to these whistleblowers or the group of workers that have filed this lawsuit. There have been similar other actions where we've seen people have to bring these claims, but we know that with agencies that are supposed to look out for workplace safety like OSHA, they've been horrific when it comes to taking up these claims and investigating them and validating them and doing anything to hold these businesses accountable.
Thank you, Kevin. For our next story, I want to go to your home state of Indiana, where a local news outlet's whistleblower investigation restores women's unemployment benefits. What do you have here?
Yeah, this is I wouldn't call it an uplifting story. I don't want to fall into the trap of saying that this is a story that we should have warm feels around, but at the same time, it did have a good outcome. So it maybe takes a little bit off the edge of our show, which tends to be a constant current of despondent and depressing news. But this does showcase issue for people who are trying to obtain unemployment benefits state by state. And you can go to Shadowproof and read at least one or two articles that we published from Michael Sionato, who has looked at the effort by people to obtain unemployment benefits, the kind of backlogged claims that exist state to state, the way that the systems have been completely overrun, unprepared. And this is the way things are because we live in a country that has culturally done everything it can to destroy social programs that are supposed to be there as a way to provide a kind of safety net for people who might need them, especially now when we're having this massive crisis. It's clear that they are not able to do even a fraction of what they should be doing because they've just been defunded and trashed by the entire spectrum of politicians that populate our legislatures, from the local levels to the federal level. And you have this story from 13 News in Indianapolis that did a whistleblower investigation, and they followed up on the story of Kim Saunders, who spent 7 months trying to obtain unemployment benefits from the Indiana Department of Workforce Development. She's a hairdresser and was told that she could not collect 9.5 weeks of pandemic unemployment assistance because there was an error in her application. And according to 13 News, they say that the number of pending unemployment claims in Indiana has grown to a staggering 1.2 million cases as of late October. So they don't have the November numbers, which is probably worse. And that increased from 708,000. So in August, it was that number, and then it went up. That's almost 500,000. That's about 500,000 there. So the system's backlogged and it's overwhelmed. And yet the story airs, and 7 hours later, because of the fact that it was in the media, Saunders found that the funds she was owed were deposited into her account. But she had, I have to give her credit for nailing the words that needed to be said when she found out about this, rather than just saying, "Oh, so nice. I'm really happy that the department could do what I needed, and it's going to be great because it's the holidays and I'm going to be able to take care of my family." She gave a much more politically savvy answer, which was, I was shocked, but I'm also pretty frustrated. It never should have taken an investigation on the news for them to do the right thing. And my real concern isn't me. It's all the other people out there who are fighting the same fight, who are not as fortunate as I am, and who don't know what to do next. So she's somebody who understood how to challenge the department. She's somebody with means. And obviously, she was able to get a local news outlet on her side to investigate. So that speaks to something that she has in the way of being able to defend herself. There are many, many people in poverty who probably don't know where to begin to try and untangle the mess that they're in bureaucratically and the sort of injustice they're suffering as they try to collect some kind of relief. And the pressure just gets harder and harder for families because we still haven't seen any further stimulus relief. And we need that. We know we need that. We know the people who run or who are supposed to be stewards of this economy say that there needs to be something done, or else the kind of crash or collapse that we could see in the economy, the sort of stress that'll lead to further layoffs, it's going to be even worse tragedy, but nothing's been done yet. And what's on the table, the offers have been insulting. And so you have people like Kim Saunders who are leading to these kinds of local news investigations that do expose the inequities and the failures of state government.
Thank you very much. Let's go to our regular Assange segment here at the end of the show. I know that you've done some coverage of this, Kevin, so I'm looking forward to hearing you talk about the Crown Prosecution Service filing closing argument in Assange's extradition trial. What's the update with Julian Assange?
So first, I encourage you to go to the Dissenter newsletter to read the rundown that I did of this. Generally, I focused in on the line they were pushing really hard, which was to say that WikiLeaks was this law-breaking organization, a kind of a criminal enterprise, as I put it, that they say, quote, was in the business of encouraging individuals to hack into computers. They don't have to give a whole lot of evidence. But what I point out is that, to me, this is lawfare that fits in with the kind of U.S. counterintelligence strategy developed in the last years. It happened under Donald Trump. It would have happened under any president. It could have happened under President Barack Obama. But what you find in this memorandum or the strategy document that was issued in the last year or two, actually it was signed off on in 2020. It says that they are fighting Russia. We're challenging China. We're trying to counter the influence of Iran, and we're concerned about the threat from North Korea and Cuba. And there's the terrorist groups like Al Qaeda and ISIS, which we've been droning and bombing and going after. But then there's these ideologically motivated entities such as hacktivists, leaktivists, and public disclosure organizations. So WikiLeaks. And those are viewed as significant threats by U.S. intelligence agents or the CIA and probably the Director of National Intelligence, which the mass surveillance conglomerate that is in the United States. And so I see this extradition case as an extension of this strategy, and you can really see it in the closing argument submission, that if you're the lawyers for the legal team for Assange, you have just about everything in this submission that you need to make the case, at least in the court of public opinion. I don't know if the judge who's in the magistrate court is going to listen, but you have everything you need to show that this is a political prosecution, because it really extends from a decision to go after Assange and challenge the existence of the WikiLeaks organization and the kind of impact it's able to have by publishing documents. And we were talking now, we're right in the middle of the 10th anniversary of Cablegate, where we saw the beginnings of of these cables that were revealed and had great impact and gave us an incredible understanding of the workings of American empire, and it's been something that has been referenced by people who cover U.S. foreign policy appropriately, who care about the impacts of it and the way that the U.S. uses its influence to get away with torture and war crimes, etc., and the way it conceals misconduct or engages in it privately, or pressures and strong arms governments to follow their own agenda. So we can go back to what it was like 10 years ago when that came out, and we can see the sort of reaction we had from figures like Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and you had Joe Biden as vice president, who wasn't too happy, called Julian Assange a high-tech terrorist, or said he was more like a high-tech terrorist. Mitch McConnell was a figure who was speaking out. You get people who followed this closely, who were in the Obama administration, who are being invited back to be in Biden's administration. So in any case, you can look at this submission from the Crown Prosecution Service, and you can make some connections that I think are important to understanding. But I want to leave my story and just highlight some of the quotes from this submission that I didn't include in my report, which give people who are watching this show something fresh that they can dig into. So the first quote I'd like to share here says, "If the prosecution of Assange, as opposed to any journalist or newspaper which published the WikiLeaks materials, is part of some war or intended to chill the media, it might be thought wholly inconsistent with that aim that it was accompanied by an announcement which made plain a policy not to prosecute journalists for reporting, and that the Department of Justice did not regard Assange as a journalist." So if you can follow that at all, the Justice Department says Julian Assange is not a journalist, and they also said when they announced the indictment that they don't have a policy of prosecuting journalists. So we should all just let this go. We should just let the Assange prosecution go forward and be happy that it's an exception to the rule, and they're never going to use it in the future to go after journalists. So even if you would agree, I don't, but even if we would agree that he's more of a hacker than a journalist, the way they're going about this, we would never have to be worried in the future like press freedom organizations are, because they themselves, so they're never going to do it. I mean, obviously that's ridiculous. I don't think we should trust the government to hold to that. And you could have Donald Trump part 2 or whatever come back into power, and if this was a precedent, they could go forward with going after whomever. So I frankly don't care about the pledges or commitments of administrations or agencies of government, because at any time they can go back and violate those. The second thing I want to work in here is them saying that the defense has got it all wrong about what Julian Assange is charged with committing. And so what they outline is that he is complicit in illegal acts to obtain or receive voluminous databases of classified information, that Assange had an agreement and attempted to obtain classified information through computer hacking, and then that his publishing certain classified documents contain the unredacted names of innocent people who risked their safety and freedom to provide information to the United States and its allies, including local Afghans and Iraqis, journalists, religious leaders, human rights advocates, and political dissidents from repressive regimes. So the issue I have with this is the government is still pushing their conspiracy theory that they have about how Julian Assange recruited Chelsea Manning to do this work for him and to serve WikiLeaks' goals, which are the ones that are promoted by U.S. intelligence agencies. That's the way they want us to negatively view WikiLeaks as an enemy of the United States. They themselves are saying that he was complicit in these illegal acts to receive the databases of classified information. So he's putting Chelsea Manning up to providing the classified information. referencing the chat logs, saying that he agreed and attempted to engage in computer hacking. Again, they have not been able to prove that there was any meaningful effort to crack a password or crack the password hash. It's even more specific than just that. We went through that evidence from the trial on the show previously, so I won't go through it again, but they had Patrick Eller take the stand. He's a former U.S. Army computer crime investigator, and he basically demolished everything that they've been trying to say about what Assange did in agreeing to a kind of password cracking conspiracy. And then you have this thing about the publication of unredacted names, and it must be stated and made clear that there just isn't any law in the United States that says you can't publish names. So even if you accept that the government can punish Julian Assange, who's an Australian citizen, and prosecute him for violating U.S. laws, well, it's actually not a crime to publish unredacted names of people, whether they're innocent or not. I mean, I don't know what they mean by innocent. Some of these people may or may not be, which was something that Julian Assange did. I mean, I don't know who these specific people are. I don't know what they were doing. Sometimes we align ourselves with some pretty unsavory characters in order to prosecute our wars. It's been known to happen. I mean, we're arming jihadist groups in Syria. So who are they talking about? Are the local Afghans and Iraqis? Are they warlords? Who are these people that are in danger from the WikiLeaks disclosures? They don't say. They can't. They claim that that's classified information. So it's not something that they put out in the record for us to dig into. Then thirdly, I have down here that the allegation is that the U.S. proceeded against all international legal norms to violate Mr. Assange's asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy. This is simply wrong, and the evidence does not substantiate this allegation. But even if it were true, the defendant was a fugitive from justice as regards the United Kingdom authorities and a suspect in the United States while in the embassy. Mr. Assange's grant of asylum was not an immunity. The rule of international law simply makes the embassy of a foreign state inviolate unless the foreign state invites the host country in. And I know that those words are pretty sterile. So what it means is we are going to hide behind the fact that the United Kingdom wouldn't recognize the institution of asylum and allow Julian Assange to have the protection from the Ecuador, or that was given to him from Ecuador. They insisted and maintained he had jumped bail, probably because the U.S. was pressuring the U.K. And so we do not accept that he was ever anything but a fugitive from justice. And so, again, this is making a complete mockery of the institution of asylum. Just a couple more quick quotes from this before I wrap here. There's one more that's important. They state, no doubt, a change of administrations in the United States of America would eradicate the defense allegations that the current administration is intent on persecuting Assange. I think this is a really important sentence in this submission, so I'll read it again. No doubt, a change of administrations in the United States of America would eradicate the defense allegations that the current administration is intent on persecuting Assange. So the big argument that is being put forward in the defense's case is that Donald Trump's administration, with people like Mike Pompeo and Jeff Sessions, politically made the political choice to go after Julian Assange, and it was different from what the Obama administration decided to do. It was tarnished by a political drive to go after WikiLeaks, and because of what it represents. And so they're saying because Joe Biden won the election, there's a change of administrations. They're basically hinting that Joe Biden's going to come into office, the Justice Department is going to continue this case, and it'll be harder for the defense team to say that this is a politically motivated case because you will remove the Trump factor and you'll have Biden embracing this case potentially. And if he continues with this going forward, it's going to make it bipartisan consensus. It's going to become a thing. So far we can point to a disagreement, but if he goes back on what Obama did, then this is something the Justice Department is going to hide behind to suggest that Assange is actually being treated fairly. They're going to claim that they're applying the law fairly because now you have people in the Biden administration potentially who believe that the Justice Department did follow proper procedures. So to me, it's kind of alarming. It puts me on alert for whatever's going to happen next with the Biden administration. And then to close, I have to read this because it's truly heinous what they articulate here about Assange and his family. So I want to get this out. It is in the section of the submission that refers to the passage of time and the injustice that stems from bringing this case 7 to 10 years later. And as it says, they believe that Assange evaded justice, and it goes on to address the fact that he now has children. To the extent that Assange relies on changes in personal circumstances which have arisen during the period that he lived at the embassy, notice they say lived, they can constantly say lived. He's not an asylee, he's not somebody who had protection, he was just holed up there. You know, we know holed up is something that they usually have as the language in the mainstream media's coverage. They say he lived at the embassy, then the only changes known to the prosecution are that he's had 2 children. Again, any decision Assange made to establish a family life when, on his own case, he faced prosecution and was living in an embassy expressly so as to avoid extradition, was a decision made in the full knowledge of how precarious the foundation of that family life was. His family life was built on foundations of sand. And so I want to say that he's, you know, like a 50-year-old man, very nearly. And so he was middle-aged and he made this choice to have children. And it's very clear from the timeline of events that he formed this relationship with Stella Morris, and he had children believing from the last few years that there wasn't going to be a case brought against him and that eventually he was going to be able to leave the embassy. And in 2017, around Christmas, he had secured diplomatic status and was working on getting to Ecuador, and I didn't think there was going to be a legal case at that point. It had been 4 years, at least around that amount, since the Obama administration had basically passed on bringing a case. We saw that covered in the Washington Post. And so, you know, I don't know, this thing of foundations of sand is very crude and vile to me. And I think, it suggests that he had these children just to play them off as kind of pawns in a game. And to me, I think that's probably projection, because it sounds like something the people who run this country might do to get some kind of edge over a political adversary. I tend to think most of the people in our government are projecting when they say things like this, because this is what they would do. But I think he very genuinely wanted to have this family, and for them to suggest that he's doing this as a way to further his criminal life or further his evasion of justice or whatever is very crude.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, that is all the stories that we had for today. Was there anything that you wanted to leave people with, talking about the next couple weeks, or anything you've got on your mind before we depart?
Well, so I just want to say that I had an opportunity to do 2 hours with Katie Halper last night, and the show was on Wednesday, December 2nd. We'll put it on one of our lists for our YouTube channel so people can go see that. But I'll probably I might hold off and wait for any clips that she shares. I know that she's known to share clips from her show, but it was a great opportunity to talk with her. And I see Jared is saying the video is gone. I'll have to go check and see what's going on with Katie's channel, and I don't know why it would be gone. It was a live stream, but yeah, so I want to thank everyone for the support that they've shown to this show, and just say that it was a great opportunity to be able to talk to Katie, and I really am grateful for the exposure that she gave to my work. I think she even shared the Patreon that we have that I think I have for unauthorized disclosure, just so I could get a microphone, because when we started the show, we were talking, and you can tell when people have good microphones and then I'm using a computer laptop, it's pretty evident. You can tell the difference in audio quality. But most of the time people don't complain. I also did a really hilarious thing. And since I just said some really heavy stuff, I'll give people a chance to laugh at me. Ryan, I shared the StreamYard link on Twitter as the link to go watch her show. And she had to very awkwardly tell me that you need to go delete that tweet, or else I'm just going to be sitting here for the next hour blocking people from accessing.
Well, that's okay. I accidentally blocked our good friend Rob here in the chat when I was trying to tell him thank you for giving us a donation while you were talking. So then I had to scramble and figure out how to unblock Rob, but he's back. So hi, Rob. Thank you for your patience.
Hey, Rob. Thank you for your support.
Yeah.
We really appreciate your support.
So you and I are just knocking it out of the park this week, I guess.
Yeah. It all comes together eventually. I mean, eventually we get it right. And I think I saw some people mentioning Rockfin. We may be exploring a presence for the show on Rockfin. I'm experimenting and seeing how that goes for my weekly podcast with Radia Kalik. And thus far, it has potential, I'll say. But I haven't completely ditched Patreon, and I still am using that. But I do think that, we talk about these things. We don't need to have a long, drawn-out conversation, but just to, quickly note, we'll have conversations at the end here as we're wrapping up and talk about media and some of the struggles and things that we're working through. And I do think that one thing is to not put, as the phrase or cliche would go, all our eggs in the basket. We need to be spread out and using these different platforms, and that is hard work. And we do need to decide how much labor we want to put into our presence across the different platforms. But at the same time, having different ways that people can find you is really the way for, I think, independent media to survive. It's not a guarantee that you thrive by doing it, but it is a way to get to survival. And if we are trying to build our followings, we naturally need to be in as many places as possible so people can be introduced to us. Because I think, the goal for me is, if I could get 1 million people to watch this, that would be amazing. But that's a fantasy. That's probably not likely. What I really want more than anything is a group of 1,000 people who really care about this show, who watch it week to week, who engage with what we do and appreciate it. And that's all I really ask for. I think that's a great audience. I mean, if we had an audience for this show, that if we were out in a pandemic-free world and I was trying to fill a theater and we could see 500 or 600 people and they could come to that show and they could hear us do this, that would be spectacular to me. That'd be good enough. And to know that those people were always there for us, that would be really good for our work that we do. So, and I know we're still working on building the fellowship, the Marvel Cook thing, to do coverage of abolition. It's been a hilarious week for that, for the abolition work, because everyone was invited to basically concern troll the Defund the Police thing, which is, it's not a slogan. I'll just share my own view of this, which is that, and this is something that I've tweeted, it's not a slogan. To me, a slogan is I reference commercials, where's the beef? Just do it. These are and also Obama got an Advertising Age magazine award for his thing. So he's thinking like a marketer. Yeah. And but I think as I know that people are ambivalent, but at least people like AOC can see through it. At least there's people like Michael Eric Dyson that can see through this, what Obama is doing, because they never say what the alternative is, right? I think that's a really good thing to point out. It's like whenever they critique this thing of like, oh, that shouldn't be the slogan, they never say what people should be doing otherwise.
Unless you're Matt Iglesias, who is just like, just more police. Actually, we should just get more police all the time. You know, we can never spend enough money on the police. There's literally no, you know, it's the same thing as the way people talk about the military. I think the thing about the slogan, and not to go, I know that most of our viewers here are here to listen to you talk about whistleblowing and Julian Assange and so on and so forth, but as long as we're
it's the overtime part, it's the overtime portion of the show, and we'll just take a few minutes.
My feeling on this whole kerfluffle around defund the police is that I think a lot of people who don't want to accept how close the election was are looking for somebody to blame that has nothing to do with any of their own political priorities. I think a lot of people understand sort of the racial undercurrent of supporting the police in this country. And so I think that is part of the issue with what you're saying, with like not really countering their criticism of defund the police with anything, because they know that doing so has implicit sort of racial assumptions with it. And the last thing I'll say is that I just think the thing about defund the police is, you're right, it's not a slogan, it's a demand, but it's also wasn't crafted with any electoral implications in mind. This wasn't Democratic operatives trying to figure out how to elect people at the polls. Not all movements are tied to elections. Not all politics is electoral. And I think it's important to recognize that so-called unpopular slogans in this instance are real politicizing moments. I think the value of it will probably not be felt for a few years. And what is happening now is that people are being confronted with the possibility of questioning the sort of inevitability of the police, that they're always going to be here, that they're a permanent fixture of our society, that we were uncivilized creatures before they existed, and to have sort of the opportunity to question that dogma is a profoundly powerful thing. Even if you come out of it on the other side and being like, no, you know, I still believe in policing, you know, that's fine. But I think even just the moment of sort of cracking open reality for a second and questioning something so seemingly permanent is the power of it. So yeah, those are just some of my takeaways. A lot of it, like you said, though, is extremely cynical. It's just people who don't want to have any introspection on their own politics, I think.
Well, and to me, the thing that maybe makes it clear that it is the thing that people should stick with and continue to use is what Katie says. She talks about woke washing, as she puts it. And I think it's impervious to woke washing, defund the police. Yeah. Like Black Lives Matter has clearly been co-opted and manipulated by a range of corporations and nonprofit organizations. The NFL has taken it up. You see NCAA football coaches using it. You see people who are in, just regular workspaces. It's been depleted of a lot of its radical oomph, so to speak, that it had when it came about, 6 years ago. Michael Brown and many of those cases that have been pushed aside and forgotten for the second cycle, the second wave of cases we've dealt with this year and in the recent years. And so to me, it's just like, you can't make defund the police about some, woke washing, lame way of upholding patriarchy or whatever that might want to be done, or a way of upholding corporate power, the influence and maintaining structures. Defund the police requires a fundamental shift in how we organize society, which is what these activists are demanding. They're saying we have to. So, you agree, but I think to me, that's why we see what we see. And it's I think we said before we came into and started the show, it's like counterinsurgency.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
They have to find a way to discredit it. It doesn't have to make sense. And, in a way, you could say it's kind of Trumpian because they get us talking and debating it. And then we just get distracted arguing over, the efficacy of 3 words. We're debating the efficacy of 3 words instead of doing the work, instead of supporting the organizers. You get pulled into writing think pieces about these 3 words and whether they're going to hamper or hold us back.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the conversation around defund the police, around sort of the particularly, this happens obviously in the Democratic Party and with liberals, but especially with Republicans, I think it's easy to begin to see that a lot of the words like defund, the way that they talk about these things are sort of resurgent racist dog whistling politics. I mean, all of these things are standing in for ways to criticize anti-racist, anti-colonialist organizing without actually saying those words and saying that that's what they're doing. This is the exact same thing. I mean, more or less the way that police and the media and academics work together in the aftermath of the civil rights movement and the riots of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, finding ways to take these things and sort of harness the more conservative white backlash against them and start using dog whistling terms that, even in this past election, we just had 2 candidates running on Law and Order platforms in the year 2020.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think.
I know we need to wrap.
Our poor commenters here.
But I want to just say a couple things to some generally to the comments that we have here, and then we'll conclude the show. Just I see people who are concerned at whether YouTube might be suppressing us or not. I can say that there have been interviews and videos that I've posted that I know are limiting the kinds of ads we can show. I did an interview with Marjorie Cohn about the Iraq War Logs anniversary, the 10-year anniversary. And just because we were discussing war, I mean, they said we couldn't have ads placed in the video to the extent that other videos are able to have ads, which to me is just a great way. If you really want to make sure that people who cover this stuff don't cover this stuff, again, like you and I could just spend the end of our shows talking about the latest stupidity that Joe Biden said instead of getting into anything substantive. We'll just focus on personalities and talk about whether Trump's going to come back and run in 2024 or not, even though that's a long way off. And why should I occupy my time trying to figure that out right now when, who knows? Nobody knows. But, so they're doing this kind of, it's soft censorship. It's not blatant, but it does impact who gets exposed, and that it impacts our ability to do work because it limits the kind of monetization that we're all supposed to have equal access to doing. We did what we were supposed to. Thanks to all of you, we got the number of subscribers we needed to qualify for having ad placement and for doing the kind of show that a lot of others, and we have now the ability for people to give donations and buy us coffee or get us a sub sandwich for lunch or whatever they want to do. And that's been nice for us, but there's still ways that YouTube can kind of get in the way of that. And I see people suggesting that they don't associate the show with others, so they don't know that they could watch this, or they don't know that we're streaming, even though they subscribe to the channel. So I would just say to that this is why we're looking at a platform like Rockfin, which, by the way, you can just host your stuff there. It's not on YouTube. And there is a way for us to do a live stream there. I'm just learning the way to do it. And I want to make sure that it actually does produce and give us value. But, I have to say that I'm ideologically inclined to leave these bigger places like YouTube that's controlled by Google. I'm inclined to find ways that we can build power elsewhere that's outside the scope of like Facebook and even Apple and absolutely Twitter, to have these other platforms that we can use. So we've gone much longer than we normally do. We're now just kind of like talking and chewing up airtime, which is nice. We still have people who are watching, but I know that we're busy people and we have to get back to doing real journalism, which involves, my favorite thing to say right now is like, it involves looking at the biographies of people who Joe Biden is selecting, looking at who they are and what they've said, sharing those details and being like, hey, look, this is what they've done. And then for us, it means that we are attacked very senselessly, and the impulse comes immediately to be like, no, that's not pragmatic. You shouldn't be doing this because we need to give Joe Biden a chance. No, actually, we don't. I'm not a politician. I'm not. Like, even if
you don't need to get on private, Kevin.
Yeah. Joan Walsh tells us to get on message. Neera Tanden says we're not an actual news outlet, so we shouldn't have to bother with it. So, like, if she saw our thread about her, she could just brush it aside and be like, I don't know, those guys aren't real news. So
I do think, a lot of what's happening right now with these initial reactions, like you're describing, very, very, very reminiscent of the Obama years. Kevin and I worked at Fire Dog Lake, which was perhaps the only, if not one of the only sort of major blogs during the Obama administration that was sort of an oppositional left faction within the Democratic Party. And a lot of it is very familiar, but I can't help but think that the culture has really moved on from that, and try as people might to replay some of those, like, give him a chance, pragmatism, all that bullshit. I don't think it's going to fly like it did a decade ago. I think people are more militant.
Yeah.
The crises are more deeper. And I think that, not that exit polls are everything, but if you look at the exit polls from the 2020 election and the presidential ticket, the vast majority of people who voted for Joe Biden were voting against Donald Trump. I don't think there is a sort of the same kind of belief in Joe Biden as there was in Barack Obama. And I just don't think it's going to work.
Yeah. Well, there are projects out there. If you find them like ours, or anyone who shares our interest in challenging this Democratic Party and not taking it as the only voice for what is right and wrong. I think I'm about to go subscribe annually to Sirota and Andrew Perez and Walker Bragman's Daily Poster. They are doing something that we try to do, which is they're trying to grow their organization so that they can hire people to write for them. And so I endorse anybody who's doing that. And they've been doing great digging into people and their connections. We need just very basically follow the money journalism more than ever. Like, we don't just need takes.
Outlets. Yeah. We
don't just need takes. We don't just need to know why these people are wrong. We need people who can show why they are not the people who should be in government. And that takes research, that takes time and effort. It means more than just sitting here on this stream, which is why we're going to need to wrap this up. And thank you all for watching this show. But I have to go to work researching the next batch of appointments that are going to be in Joe Biden's administration. We'll come back next week and we'll have more for you on the Assange case. But there's the if you go there, you can sign up for the newsletter. And if we can get Substack to fix everything, there'll be an annual rate at a much lower price. Because when I was brought into it, I was told that I needed to charge some insane amount for an annual subscription. And I've been lucky enough to find a few people who will come on as sustaining supporters and give me that amount. But it's just, I know I'm losing a ton of people. We're losing a ton of people because they were wrong. And so they need to fix it and make it so that I can ask you to give way, way less than the amount that I've set it at. And then I think, this newsletter is going to be good, and we can start to even pay other people to write for it as well, in addition to me. So until next time, thank you everyone for watching the Dissenter, and we'll be back next week with another show.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Mini Ninja Love, for giving. Thank you, Kelly, for giving. Make sure that you're following us wherever you're watching. Really appreciate the support, and thanks for hanging around. Talk to you next week.